Rachel once believed that love meant trust. She had married Aaron with her whole heart, certain that the man she called her husband would protect their future as fiercely as she had protected his dreams. She worked extra hours so he could focus on climbing the ladder at his company. She skipped little luxuries, new clothes, dinners out, because Aaron insisted they needed to think big. Rachel thought they were building a life together. A shared vision. A marriage grounded in loyalty. But loyalty, as she would soon learn, was not Aaron's strength. The first cracks appeared quietly. Letters arriving in the mail with strange company logos, her name spelled correctly but with addresses she didn't recognize. She assumed it was a mix-up, perhaps junk mail. Aaron would shrug and toss them aside. Then came the phone calls. "Mrs. Blake, we're following up on your account." "What account?" Rachel asked, confused. The voice on the other end listed numbers. Amounts she had never spent, purchases she had never made. A new television. Designer suits. An expensive watch. Her stomach dropped. By the third call, Rachel demanded answers from Aaron. He sighed as if she were being dramatic. "Relax, Rach. It's just credit. Everybody does it. I'll pay it off when the bonuses come in." "But they're in my name," she whispered, her chest tightening. "These accounts are under my name." Aaron's jaw tightened. "You're my wife. What's yours is mine. Don't make such a fuss." The debt snowballed quickly. Collectors came to the door, speaking Rachel's name, not Aaron's. Letters piled higher, stamped with red. "Past due. Final notice." Rachel sat at the kitchen table one night, surrounded by bills that seemed to grow with every passing week. Tears blurred the ink, but she added the numbers again and again, hoping her math was wrong. It wasn't. The man she trusted had opened credit cards in her name, drained them, and left her with the wreckage. When she confronted him again, Aaron's response sliced deeper than the betrayal itself. "You've always been careless with money," he sneered, pacing the living room. "No one's surprised this happened. You're too stupid to handle finances." Rachel's hands shook. "I never. These weren't my charges. You did this." Aaron smirked, sipping from his glass of whiskey as though the destruction of her financial life was just another inconvenience. "Prove it." The humiliation didn't stop there. Friends began to pull away. Mutual acquaintances whispered that Rachel had ruined herself financially. Aaron's version of the story spread. That she was reckless, addicted to shopping, incapable of responsibility. The truth was messier and no one wanted to hear it. Rachel applied for a new apartment after he walked out, only to be denied because of her ruined credit score. She tried to take out a loan to consolidate the debt, only to be laughed out of the bank. Her name, once her pride, was now a prison. The final blow came during the divorce proceedings. Aaron filed with a smile, his own accounts miraculously spotless. Rachel, meanwhile, was left drowning in debt that legally belonged to her. "You'll never get out from under this," he told her coldly outside the courthouse. "Some people are just failures with money. You're one of them." Rachel stood on the courthouse steps, the city buzzing around her, while the weight of his words pressed down like chains. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to beg the universe for a different ending. But she didn't. She stood still, her nails digging into her palms. Because somewhere beneath the humiliation and the wreckage, something inside her whispered, "This is not the end of my story." That night, back in her tiny rented apartment with its peeling wallpaper and flickering light, Rachel spread the bills out across the floor. Each sheet of paper was a reminder of betrayal, of trust weaponized against her. She picked one up, read the balance, and whispered through clenched teeth, "How do you rebuild when someone destroys your name?" The room didn't answer. But the question hung heavy in the air, demanding that she find out. The next morning, Rachel dragged herself to work, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. The collectors didn't stop calling. The rejection letters didn't stop arriving. And yet each obstacle seemed to ignite something in her, a fragile ember that refused to die. She would not let Aaron's betrayal be the last chapter of her story. She didn't know how yet. He didn't know when. But one day she vowed silently she would rise again. And when she did, the world would know the truth about who Rachel really was. The weeks after the divorce felt like an endless storm. Rachel thought the worst was over when Aaron walked away, but in truth the worst was only beginning. Everywhere she turned, the ruined shadow of her credit followed her. When she applied for an apartment, the landlord smiled politely, then slid the paperwork back across the table. "I'm sorry, Miss Blake. The score just isn't there. We can't take the risk." The shame stung more than the rejection itself. She walked out into the rain that night, clutching her folder of documents, her cheeks burning with the knowledge that Aaron had left her with a name no one wanted to trust. The job hunt was no kinder. Rachel's resume was solid, years of dedication, glowing references from supervisors. But every time her application required a background check, the result was the same. The rejections piled up in her inbox, vague but clear in their meaning. "We don't trust you." Friends she once confided in began to pull away. Mutual acquaintances repeated Aaron's story, sometimes casually, sometimes with sharp edges. He said she was always reckless. Apparently she maxed out cards left and right. Sad really. Rachel overheard whispers at a cafe one afternoon, two women from their old circle laughing softly over lattes. She brought it on herself. "Honestly, I don't know why Aaron stayed with her as long as he did." The words pierced like knives not because she believed them, but because they had been accepted so easily by others. His lies had become her reputation. Survival meant swallowing pride. Rachel worked anywhere that would take her. Waitressing late shifts at diners, tutoring kids in math for a few dollars an hour, even stocking shelves overnight at a supermarket. Her body ached constantly. She clipped coupons religiously, learned which nights local bakeries threw away unsold bread, and sometimes skipped meals so rent could be paid. The anxiety was constant, a low hum in her chest that never seemed to quiet. Every time her phone buzzed, she feared it was another collector. Every time she opened her mailbox, she braced herself for another bill stamped in red. The lowest point came one Thursday evening at the grocery store. She had a basket with only the basics: milk, rice, beans, a pack of eggs. She placed them gently on the belt, her mind already calculating how many meals she could stretch from this. "Card or cash?" the cashier asked. "Card." Her voice was small. She swiped. Waited. Declined. Her stomach lurched. She tried again, her hands trembling. The same message blinked back. And that's when she heard it. A familiar laugh. Rachel turned, her breath catching. Aaron stood a few feet away, his arm draped around a woman in designer heels, her nails perfectly manicured. His new girlfriend. "Well, well," Aaron said, his voice carrying too easily across the checkout line. "Some things never change, huh?" The girlfriend chuckled, leaning close to whisper something, her eyes sweeping Rachel's basket as though the rice and beans were a personal failure. Rachel's cheeks burned. The cashier shifted uncomfortably, the line of customers behind her growing restless. For a moment Rachel wanted to run. To leave the basket, to escape their laughter. But her legs stayed rooted. She gathered the little strength she had and said quietly, "I'll pay with cash." She counted out crumpled bills, one by one, until the total was met. Her hands shook as she stuffed the groceries into a bag and walked out, Aaron's smirk following her like a shadow. That night, sitting in her tiny apartment, Rachel broke down. The humiliation clung to her skin, heavy and raw. She pressed her palms against her eyes until they ached, whispering, "This can't be my life. This can't be all there is." But as the sobs faded, silence filled the room. A silence that left space for something else. Resolve. Rachel pulled out an old notebook. She had always scribbled ideas in margins, little sketches of systems, ways to make things better. Now, through her tears, she began again. This time, the notes weren't just idle thoughts. They were survival. She sketched the outline of an idea. An app that could track spending, send reminders, help people rebuild their credit step by step. Not for the wealthy. For people like her, the forgotten, the judged, the ones left behind by a single mistake. Rachel didn't have resources. She didn't have support. But she had time, determination, and an internet connection. She borrowed books from the library on coding. She stayed up past midnight watching free tutorials, pausing and replaying until the logic made sense. At the diner during slow hours, she scribbled diagrams on napkins. On the bus, she wrote feature lists in the margins of newspapers. She wasn't building for investors or applause. She was building for herself, for the version of Rachel who had once stood trembling at the grocery checkout. The nights were long, the progress slow. Sometimes exhaustion won, and she'd fall asleep with her laptop open, code half-typed. But each small step kept the ember alive. And one night, after hours of scribbling, she closed her notebook, pressed it to her chest and whispered into the darkness. What if this little idea could change everything? The question lingered in the silence, fragile but powerful. For the first time in months, she drifted to sleep not with tears, but with a spark of hope. Rachel's notebook became her lifeline. The scrawled sketches, arrows, and messy notes began to take shape, evolving from raw thoughts into the outline of something tangible. A financial literacy app. Not just a budgeting tool, something more personal. An app designed for people like her, people blindsided by debt, people clawing their way back with no one to guide them. She wanted it to do everything Erin had sneered she couldn't. Manage credit, track payments, rebuild dignity. It wasn't just an app. It was a promise that no one else would feel as helpless as she had at that grocery checkout line. But good intentions didn't pay developers. Rachel knew she couldn't rely on anyone else to build it for her. So she taught herself. By day she poured coffee in balance trays at the diner. By night she stared at a glowing screen, lines of code blurring in front of her until her eyes burned. Progress was painfully slow. She cursed at error messages, cheered at small victories, and filled her walls with sticky notes. Reminders, goals, scraps of inspiration. Some nights exhaustion crushed her. She would fall asleep hunched over her laptop, the glow of the screen casting shadows across her tear-streaked face. But each morning she dragged herself up and tried again. Months passed. Savings from double shifts at the diner and odd freelance jobs went into small investments. A used laptop that wouldn't crash every 2 hours, cheap design software, a better internet plan. Her diet was still rice and beans, her apartment still drafty and dim, but in the quiet hours she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The first time her prototype ran, she nearly cried. The interface was clunky, the colors mismatched, but the functions worked. A notification popped up, payment due in 3 days, and she whispered, yes, as though she'd cracked a secret code to life itself. It was far from perfect, but it was real. And real was enough to take the next step. Rachel scoured the internet for pitch opportunities, though most required connections she didn't have. Then she found it. A small startup event in the city, open to first-time entrepreneurs. No guarantees but a chance to present. She signed up with trembling fingers. The night of the event, Rachel wore her only blazer, the seams fraying, sleeves just a little too long. She carried her beat-up laptop like it was treasure. The room buzzed with energy. Young founders with sleek slideshows, polished voices, and confidence that filled the air. Rachel felt like an imposter, clutching her notes, her throat dry. When it was her turn, she stood on the stage, heart pounding. I'm Rachel Blake, she began, her voice steadier than she expected. And I know what it feels like to be humiliated by money. To have your dignity stripped away because of numbers on a page. I built this app because I believe no one should have to feel powerless the way I did. She showed the prototype, demonstrating how it helped track debt, build credit, and encourage small wins. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. The judges clapped politely. A few in the audience looked intrigued, others distracted. Rachel stepped off the stage convinced she had failed. And then she heard a voice behind her. That was one of the most genuine pitches I've heard all night. She turned. A tall man in a simple suit stood there, his presence calm yet commanding. His eyes weren't just watching her. They were studying her, seeing through the nerves to the determination beneath. I'm Ethan Clark, he said, extending his hand. Rachel blinked. She knew that name. Everyone in the fintech world did. He wasn't just successful, he was legendary. The billionaire who had built an empire by creating tools to make finance more accessible. Thank you, she stammered, shaking his hand. He smiled faintly. Most people build for profit. You built for survival. That matters. Tell me more. That conversation spilled into hours. Ethan listened, really listened, as Rachel explained her journey, her vision, the night spent coding until dawn. He didn't laugh at her small beginnings. He didn't dismiss her struggles. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes sharp, asking questions no one had ever cared enough to ask. And at the end, he said the words Rachel had longed to hear but never expected. I'd like to help you build this. Ethan became more than an investor. He became a mentor. He introduced her to developers who refined her code, designers who polished the interface, marketers who understood her vision. He poured resources into the app, but more importantly, he poured belief into Rachel. Weeks turned into months, and together they transformed her fragile prototype into something extraordinary. When they launched, Rachel expected a few downloads, maybe some polite reviews. Instead, the app exploded. Words spread quickly. Blogs praised its simplicity, financial advisors recommended it, and people across the country began sharing how it changed their lives. Within 6 months, it wasn't just an app. It was a movement. Millions downloaded it. Articles called Rachel a visionary who turned her lowest point into innovation. Interviews followed. Her face appeared in magazines, her name on panels. For the first time, Rachel's name was no longer tied to debt or disgrace. It was tied to hope. Through it all, Ethan remained by her side, not just as a business partner but as a friend. Their late-night strategy sessions turned into dinners, then walks, then conversations about everything beyond business. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was steady, built on respect and shared passion. Ethan admired her resilience. Rachel admired his humility. Slowly, inevitably, their partnership deepened into love. The day Ethan asked her to marry him, it wasn't with grandeur but with sincerity. "You once told me you built your app so no one would feel powerless again. You've given power back to millions. Let me spend my life giving you all the support you deserve." Rachel said yes, tears streaming down her face. Together they built more than a company. They built a legacy. A foundation for financial literacy, scholarships for underprivileged students, programs to help single mothers reclaim stability. Rachel wasn't just successful, she was respected, admired, and loved. Her name, once tarnished, now symbolized resilience. And then one crisp autumn morning, a sleek envelope arrived at her office. Embossed lettering gleamed across the top. Invitation to the annual business gala. Rachel's stomach tightened as she read the hosting organization's name. It was the same network where Aaron now worked. The man who had left her drowning in debt would be there. Rachel held the invitation in her hands, her pulse quickening. For years she had dreamed of this moment, facing him again, not as the broken woman he left behind, but as someone unrecognizable to his arrogance. But was she ready? Rachel had attended countless events since her app's rise, but the embossed invitation lying on her desk had felt different, heavier. This wasn't just another networking opportunity. It was a stage, and somewhere in the crowd, Aaron would be waiting. The night of the gala arrived, and Rachel chose her attire with quiet deliberation. A deep sapphire gown, elegant without being flashy, paired with simple diamond earrings Ethan had gifted her on their wedding day. Her look wasn't about spectacle, it was about presence. She wanted to walk into that ballroom not as a woman desperate to prove herself, but as a woman who already had. Ethan stood waiting by the door, his tailored black suit sharp against the warm glow of their penthouse lights. When he saw her, he smiled, not the polite smile he wore for cameras, but one of genuine admiration. "You look like the woman everyone will remember tonight," he said, offering his arm. Rachel took it, inhaling deeply. "I don't want them to remember me," she murmured. "I just want him to see." The gala was held at the Metropolitan Grand, its chandeliers dripping with crystals, the air humming with wealth and ambition. As Rachel and Ethan entered, heads turned almost immediately. Whispers followed them like shadows. "Isn't that her?" one voice murmured near the champagne table. "The woman Aaron ruined financially," another replied. Rachel caught fragments. Pity, curiosity, disbelief. She had prepared for this. Years ago, those whispers would have gutted her, but now she let them swirl around her like smoke, unable to touch the fire she carried within. She straightened her shoulders and walked beside Ethan, his presence steadying her like an anchor. Aaron spotted her almost instantly. He stood near a circle of colleagues, gesturing animatedly with a glass of scotch in hand, his voice loud enough to dominate the space. His suit was expensive, but it didn't fit the way Ethan's did. It carried the desperation of someone trying too hard. When his eyes landed on Rachel, surprise flickered for a fraction of a second, quickly replaced by a smirk. He excused himself from his group and strode toward her, his confidence radiating like a practiced performance. Well, he drawled, stopping just close enough to force the attention of nearby onlookers. "Rachel Blake. Or should I say Rachel the Resilient?" His tone dripped sarcasm. The surrounding crowd, sensing drama, leaned in. Aaron chuckled, swirling his drink. "Still pretending to know about money? Last I checked, you couldn't keep a credit card active without maxing it out. Some things never change." A few nervous laughs rippled through the group. Others exchanged wary glances, unsure if they should laugh or recoil. Rachel met Aaron's gaze, her expression calm, unreadable. She didn't flinch. She didn't snap back. And that silence unnerved him more than any retort. He pressed on, emboldened by the lack of reaction. I mean, look at you. Dressed up for the big leagues, walking around like you belong here. But everyone remembers, Rachel. Everyone remembers who you really are. This time the laughter was thinner, awkward. Even his colleagues seemed uncomfortable. But Aaron, blinded by arrogance, basked in it. Rachel simply tilted her head, offering the faintest of smiles. No anger. No fear. Just composure. Her silence was a mirror, reflecting his cruelty back at him. The chatter around the ballroom stilled as the MC stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man announced, his voice booming with authority, "thank you for joining us tonight. We are honored to host some of the most innovative and influential leaders in the business world." Rachel felt the energy in the room shift. Everyone turned toward the stage, including Aaron. He drained the last of his scotch, straightening his posture, ready for his moment. The MC continued, "Tonight, we have the privilege of unveiling a surprise acquisition, one that promises to reshape the financial landscape." A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Acquisition. Big deal. Everyone whispered about who was involved. And one of our very own members, Aaron Miller, has been at the center of this development. Aaron's chest puffed out, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He glanced toward Rachel, eyes glinting with triumph. "You see?" he whispered smugly, just loud enough for her to hear. "Still the same waitress with no ambition. And I'm about to make history." Rachel's smile widened just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Because she knew something Aaron didn't. The room buzzed with energy, curiosity hanging thick in the air. Who had acquired what? Which company was involved? And why was Aaron's name tied to it? The MC lifted his champagne flute high. "The details will be revealed shortly. But I assure you, tonight you are witnessing a landmark deal." Rachel stood still, her pulse steady, while Aaron shifted eagerly from foot to foot. The arrogance radiating from him made her think of all the years she had spent clawing her way back, all the tears shed in that drafty apartment, all the humiliation at the grocery store. This moment wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, about truth finally catching up. And as Aaron continued basking in borrowed spotlight, Rachel remained calm, her silence unshakable. Because she knew the reckoning hadn't yet arrived. It was still coming. And when it did, it would leave him shattered. The ballroom buzzed with restless energy, the MC's words still hanging in the air. Aaron stood taller, his smug grin widening as the spotlight teased his name. He thought this was his night, his redemption, his chance to prove to Rachel and everyone else that he had won. The chandeliers dimmed slightly. A hush spread across the room. "And now," the MC announced, "to share the details of this acquisition, please welcome to the stage the man whose vision continues to shape the financial world, Mr. Ethan Clark." A thunder of applause rolled through the hall. Rachel felt Ethan's hand brush against hers as he stepped forward, his presence commanding the room with quiet authority. The billionaire who had once sat in the back of a small pitch room, listening intently to her trembling words, now walked with effortless confidence to the stage. Aaron's grin faltered. Ethan adjusted the microphone, scanning the audience. His voice was smooth, deliberate. "Thank you all for being here tonight. It's not every day we announce something of this magnitude. My company has just finalized the acquisition of an organization with enormous potential, one that we believe can grow under the right leadership." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. All eyes shifted between Ethan and Aaron, anticipation thickening. Aaron puffed his chest again, convinced the moment was his. Then Ethan's smile sharpened. "The company we've acquired," he said, "is Miller Financial." Gasps echoed. Glasses clinked. The whispers were immediate. Rachel didn't look away from Aaron. She wanted to see it, the exact second the truth shattered his arrogance. His face drained of color. The scotch glass in his hand trembled. Ethan continued smoothly. "Unfortunately, Miller Financial has struggled due to mismanagement, but under our guidance, it will have the chance to rise again. And I'm proud to announce the one who will lead this new division. Someone who embodies resilience, innovation, and strength." He gestured toward Rachel. "My wife, Rachel Clark." For a moment the room seemed to freeze. Then applause thundered so loudly the crystal chandeliers trembled. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, smiling. Rachel walked gracefully toward the stage, every step steady, every breath purposeful. She hadn't planned to say anything. She hadn't needed to. But when her eyes finally met Aaron's across the crowd, words rose like they'd been waiting years for this moment. She stopped just before the microphone. The applause softened into silence. "You were right, Aaron," she said, her voice clear, carrying across the hall. "I'll always be tied to money. Only now, I own the company you lost." Laughter erupted, not cruel but full of admiration, a release of all the tension that had been building. People smiled at her, at the strength in her voice, at the elegance in her revenge. Aaron stood frozen, red blotches staining his cheeks, his once smug mouth hanging open. Rachel didn't linger. She didn't gloat. She simply turned to Ethan, who extended his arm with quiet pride. Together they left the stage, applause following them like a wave. Behind them, Aaron was left alone, dwarfed by whispers that now carried a very different tone. Mismanagement. Acquired by Clark. His ex-wife is running it? Each word chipped away at the image Aaron had tried so hard to preserve. Rachel didn't need to watch him crumble. She had lived that moment long enough in her own life. Tonight wasn't about his fall, it was about her rise. When they stepped into the quieter corridor outside the ballroom, Ethan looked down at her with a proud smile. "You didn't just stand tall tonight. You owned the room." Rachel let out a slow breath. "For years I thought revenge would mean shouting at him, making him feel as small as he made me. But standing there, I realized I didn't need that. My life is louder than any insult he ever threw at me." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Exactly. He tried to bury you. Instead you grew roots. And now," he smiled warmly, "you're unstoppable." Rachel leaned against him, her heart calm, steady. The years of humiliation, of fear, of scraping by on coupons and rejected credit cards felt like a different lifetime. Her revenge hadn't been about cruelty. It had been about transformation. Aaron had mocked her for losing control of her finances. Tonight she stood as the woman entrusted with an empire. Her ex had tried to ruin her credit. Instead she had rebuilt her life, and now carried not just wealth but dignity, love, and power. Inside the ballroom the applause still echoed, and Rachel knew the whispers had already shifted. No longer was she the woman Aaron ruined. She was Rachel Clark. Visionary, leader, wife to one of the most respected men in the world. And Aaron? He was nothing more than a cautionary tale. Rachel's victory wasn't loud. It was elegant. It was undeniable. And it was the sweetest revenge of all. Rachel's story proves that the best revenge isn't shouting back. It's rising higher than anyone expected. If her journey reminded you that setbacks can be fuel for something greater, tap like and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And tell us in the comments, what's one dream you refuse to let anyone laugh at? For more stories of resilience and poetic justice, subscribe and join us for the next story.